Hey entrepreneurs, welcome to this week's challenge. This week, my challenge for you is to be a little bit more like the traders who are most successful on Wall Street. Those who make the most money are the ones that test the highest on the trait for being devoid of emotion. And so that's probably not a surprise if you know much about investing and how much people's investment failures are because their emotions are really driving their decisions rather than rationality. So what does that have to do with productivity for an entrepreneur? Well, it has to do with the concept of temporal discounting. It's something that's this sort of irrational decision. There's some rational elements to it. Temporal discounting, another way of saying it is just time discounting, has to do with how we discount rewards and consequences the further they are in the future. So if you know that there's this chocolate cake sitting right there in front of you, and if you just take it right now, you get the instant pleasure. That pleasure being very close time-wise is greater than the 6 months to a year pleasure of having stuck to your diet, right? Because that's further out. Even though it's a greater total pleasure, you're willing to discount that future pleasure for the much smaller pleasure of a few seconds of tasting that chocolate cake. And so that's temporal discounting, and we do it all the time. What you may not realize is how much that has to do with the way you make your decisions about what gets your time, energy, and attention during your workday. So what we tend to do is make poorer decisions the closer we are in time to the moment. So if I sat down with you as an entrepreneur and we mapped out your next 6 months, you'd probably make some pretty wise decisions about, how you want to spend 60% of your day working on these long-term needle-moving projects, even though you're going to be tempted to spend your time talking with friends about the newest, coolest novel idea in your mastermind, or despite the part of you that wants to always be getting back to your team members right away and never create any time blocks for deep focus. You're going to be wiser about that stuff if we're looking further out. If we go just 1 month and we look at just the next month of your work, you're going to be a little bit less wise because we're talking about something that's a little closer. This week, you're going to say, well, I'd like to get started on that productivity system where I invest in buying back my own time. But this week's just kind of crazy and busy because I've got this and that deadline and this opportunity, and I don't want to miss that thing. And then if we go even shorter to just today, you're going to be even less wise because your emotions get more and more involved the closer it is in time. Now, if we take just the decision that's right in front of you, that's when you're the most impulsive. And to quote Nir Eyal on this topic, the author of Indistractable, he says that the only antidote to impulsivity is forethought. And that's where you say to yourself, I know I'm going to be impulsive, so I'm going to use my forethought to create some sort of scenario where I'm less likely to receive the distraction or the ping in the first place, or I've created a rhythm or a pattern where I'm in some ways removed so I can do my deep work, so I can create the progress on the stuff that really matters. And so what I'm asking you to do is to consider that people who are a little bit more toward the psychopath side of the scale make more money in the stock market because they're less emotional. So there's been some interesting research studies about this with people who've experienced some kind of brain damage. So people who, like the classic case of Phineas Gage, who have frontal lobe damage. He was the person who was one of the first people studied a long time ago, where a railroad spike went through his forebrain and it decreased his ability to hold back on emotional impulsivity. So he's less rational. And people who have that kind of brain damage in a more recent research study were found to do very poorly on this test, where they're given 20 chances to bet $1 for a chance to win $2.50 based on a flip of a coin, whether they win or lose. So rationally, if you're familiar with an expected value chart, you know that you would get on average about $1.25 per flip. So you should just take that bet every time. And the people who have the opposite brain damage do much better than those people. Let me back up. So the people who have that kind of frontal lobe damage, so they're less rational and more emotional in their response, the desire to avoid losing that dollar takes over and prevents them from doing very well on a test where they have 20 opportunities to participate or decline on taking those bets. Contrast that with a different group of people who have some damage to the emotional centers of the brain, causing them to be far less emotion driven and far more logic driven. Those people do exceptionally well on that test. They make, on average, a lot more money than those who didn't. And so we see that in Wall Street, we see that in these research studies of people with brain damage. And I have a strange conclusion for you, which is that if you're a little bit more psychopathic in your approach to yourself when it comes to your productivity, you're going to get more done. Now, I don't want you to turn off all of your emotion and stop, thinking about human beings and the fact that you're trying to do good in the world. Obviously, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the way you approach yourself. If you approach your productivity decisions about what am I going to do today, what should I do next, in a way that is less emotional, less driven by that sort of, I just feel like I need a break, or I just want to check this because I know I'll feel better if I can check that off my list first, and then I'll get back to this hard thing that takes a lot of mental energy. If we can reduce that emotional response, reduce the temporal discounting that comes from the emotional reactions we have that are irrational, that don't take us closer to our goals, then we're going to do better. We're going to get to the end of a workday more satisfied. Our overall satisfaction and well-being goes up while we're able to serve our communities better with the output of our business. And you're going to feel more satisfied. The narrative in your mind is going to shift towards, I am a person who gets stuff done. And that has a way of building on itself. If you ask me to live the lifestyle of some of the people who I've worked with, not most of the entrepreneurs I work with are very high functioning people, but I do occasionally work with someone who's really struggling. If you ask me to adopt their lifestyle, I'm not even sure I could do it. I don't think I could sleep in till noon. It's so contrary to the narrative running in my mind about who I am and what I want. I've merged my conscious and subconscious to such an extent on that level that it would take a great level of effort for me to start to become that person who's extremely unproductive. And so if you think about what that means when you start becoming more productive and you start doing things that make you feel and act more productive, you're actually shifting your narrative, your reputation with yourself, who you think of yourself as being, not just at the conscious level, but at the subconscious level. And those things start to merge, and it creates that more of a seamless feeling of, I just get stuff done, and it's not because I'm even really trying that hard anymore. It's just natural to me at this point. That's what we're going for, but sometimes you have to kind of fake it till you make it. So one of the ways to do that, to fake it till you make it, is to adopt the attitude or the thought process of someone else. So I'm not very good at negotiation and being assertive and that kind of thing. There was this lady named Janice that I went to grad school with who was extremely assertive, and everything she had an opinion about, she would get in people's face and say it however, she saw the world. And anytime I need to be more assertive, I just channel Janice. I just naturally step into the thought process. Well, what would Janice say in this situation? And suddenly thoughts come to me of what I could say to be assertive and stand up for myself that otherwise never would have popped into my mind, just because I'm modeling someone else. And in the world of coaching and psychotherapy, sometimes we call that, it comes from Milton Erickson, but it's this phrase that says, my voice will go with you. And that's where you've interacted with a coach or a therapist long enough that their voice starts to be accessible to you. You kind of know what they would say. And that's what I'm doing with Janice. I'm just saying, well, what would Janice say? And so there's a part of you that can be a little bit more on the psychopathic, unemotional side, who just says, I don't care that you're tired, get it done. The next thing you need to do is this. If you take that approach, if you say to yourself, how can I approach my work today like Iceman, like productivity Iceman would? Person who's just unemotional, don't care, just get it done. Should I take a break? No, get it done. Like taking a break obviously sometimes actually helps you to get more done. Working fewer hours often helps you to get more done, not less. Working 6 hours in general gets better results than working 10 hours for most professions where people are employed. It may not be as true for entrepreneurs because we have a different level of drive, but just keep that in mind. So I'm not saying work longer with fewer breaks. What I'm saying is be less emotional about, but I feel like doing that, or I just really find that interesting and I want to go watch that YouTube video about that first, then I'll come back to what I really need to do. To be less emotional means you're going to be more rational. And so what I'm challenging you to do is to bring more rationality into your work this week, to try stretching your sense of self by faking it till you make it, by asking yourself every time you're trying to decide what should I do next, ask yourself, what would productivity Iceman say right now? And then turn that off at the end of the workday, When you're going to go hang out with friends, don't be that psychopath. Don't be that person that's trying to be unemotional and be rational about everything, because that strips a lot of the joy out of life. And instead, we want to come back to finding the richness in life that makes all of this so fun. So your challenge this week is just to ask yourself, what would Productivity Iceman do? Your challenge is to think to yourself, how can I stretch myself toward being a little bit less emotional when it comes to choosing my actions during the workday, when it comes to being productive? Ask, what would Productivity Iceman do? And what you're doing is you're activating that part of your mind that already knows the answer. Lean into that for just a week. Stretch yourself in that way and see how it improves or changes your results. You might like it. Talk to you next week.